After my divorce, I didn't want to be around anyone. I'd spent 6 months bouncing between my brother's guest room and overpriced extended stay hotels until I remembered the old farmhouse my uncle left us. It sat on 15 acres outside Franklin, Tennessee, untouched since he passed. I'd been there as a kid, but hadn't set foot inside since the funeral. It was empty, dusty, and quiet. Perfect. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for quiet. And if I'm honest, maybe a place to fall apart in peace. I took a leave from the department, packed up my truck, and headed down with a few boxes of essentials and no real plan. My uncle never had kids, and my dad didn't want anything to do with the house, so it had just been sitting there, waiting. The property was overgrown, but the structure held. Big wraparound porch, creaky wooden floors, and a gravel driveway that sounded like static when you pulled in. The front door had a sticky hinge and the wallpaper was peeling in a few spots, but it felt sturdy. More importantly, it felt like no one would bother me there. I remember standing in the living room my first night, breathing it in. The place had a certain weight to it, cold in the corners, even with the heat on. Smelled faintly of cedar and dust. It wasn't cozy, exactly, but it felt like a place where I could be left alone. That was all I wanted. I made some instant coffee, sat on the floor against the wall, and let the quiet settle into me like a blanket. It was the first time in months that I hadn't been surrounded by people trying to fix me. My days fell into a rhythm. Chop wood, read, cook, sleep. I fixed a few broken windows, restained the porch steps, and started clearing some of the brush out back. I spent hours walking the edge of the property, trying to remember old stories my uncle told me as a kid. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps at every creek. I've seen house fires, car wrecks, people on their worst days. So when the floor groaned upstairs at night, I chalked it up to old wood and temperature swings. That house had a voice. It groaned and sighed and clicked like it was settling into itself. But by the second week, the sounds got more specific. Footsteps. Pacing. Then one night, what I could only describe as something being dragged across the floor. I'd hear it for a minute, then it would stop. Never during the day. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. It started to feel like a routine, like someone or something was stretching its legs while I lay still downstairs. I went up there the morning after I first heard it. Nothing was out of place. Just 2 bedrooms and a dusty hallway with wallpaper peeling at the edges. One door didn't latch properly, so I figured maybe it was swinging in the draft. I wedged it shut with an old towel. That night, I still heard it creak open. It gnawed at me, so I started shutting every door upstairs before bed. I'd make a mental note, closet closed, guest room door clicked into place. I even took pictures once, just to reassure myself. But I'd wake up the next morning and find one open again. Not wide, just a few inches, like someone peeked out and changed their mind. I started to dread checking. It became a routine. like brushing my teeth. Check the doors, check the locks, and try to sleep. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? Hey, I think the upstairs of my dead uncle's farmhouse has a door that opens itself. I figured it was stress. Or maybe I was sleepwalking. You learn to live with weirdness after divorce. My ex used to joke that I could sleep through a tornado, but that place, it made me hyper aware of every sound. Then came the morning. I walked into the kitchen and found all the cabinet doors open. Not just ajar, wide open. Every single one. Drawers, too. I stood there in my boxers just staring. It was still dark out. I hadn't had coffee yet. I remember checking the back door. It was locked. Nothing broken, nothing missing, no sign of forced entry. That was the first time I felt genuinely uneasy. I showered, got dressed, and drove into town. Bought a deadbolt and a padlock for the attic. I hadn't even been up there yet. Something about the way the ceiling creaked above my bed started making me feel like I wasn't the only one hearing it. I picked up a pack of cheap motion sensors, too. Figured it couldn't hurt. When I got back, I locked the attic and started sleeping with a flashlight and a tire iron by the bed. I was like, it's probably nothing. Maybe the cabinet hinges were just a little warped. I'd lived alone before, but never in a place this remote. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away. If I screamed, no one would hear me. The quiet started to feel like something watching. A thick kind of silence that pressed in from all sides. Weeks passed. The noises continued, and I stopped going upstairs at night altogether. I figured if someone wanted to squat up there, fine. Just don't come down. I still didn't think it was worth calling the sheriff. The last thing I needed was to become the guy crying ghost to a town I barely belonged to. They already looked at me like I was an outsider with baggage. Then one morning, I went to check the attic lock. It was broken. Not picked. Snapped clean. The metal latch was twisted, and the screws looked like they'd been yanked out of the wood. My heart skipped. I hadn't heard anything that night. No thumps, no creaks. But something had broken that lock, and it had done it quietly. I opened the attic door slowly. The air smelled stale, like smoke that had sunk into the wood. I climbed the ladder with my flashlight in one hand and my breath held. I was expecting mice, maybe signs of raccoons or birds. There were 3 cigarette butts lined up near the window, an old blanket folded into a rough cushion, a half-empty plastic water bottle, a peanut butter granola bar wrapper, all arranged neatly like someone had been staying there or planned to return. I backed down the ladder, closed the attic, and stood in the hallway for a long time, listening. Nothing. Just the house breathing around me, old wood shifting. I went outside, walked the property in a wide circle. No sign of forced entry, no tire tracks, no broken windows. I checked the shed, the old well, the chicken coop that hadn't seen chickens in a decade. Nothing. That night, I locked myself in the bedroom. I didn't sleep, just laid there with the flashlight pointed at the door. The motion sensor by the stairs didn't go off. That almost made it worse. Around 3:30, I heard the floor creak above me, then a soft tap. And again, not pacing, not dragging, like someone just shifting around. I stayed frozen until daylight. My coffee tasted like rust. The next night, I waited. Flashlight, tire iron, phone in hand. If I heard anything, I told myself I'd call the sheriff. I had to. I was past the point of pride. At 2:48 a.m., I heard movement upstairs. I slipped out of bed, crept toward the hallway, and waited. More creaking. Then nothing. I stepped softly up the stairs, flashlight off until I reached the top. Clicked it on. The hallway was empty. But the attic door was open, wider than before. I climbed up, hand shaking. The blanket was there, the bottle, the butts, and one more, still lit. The smoke hadn't even reached the ceiling yet. I turned and ran, down the stairs, out the door, into the truck. I don't remember unlocking it. Just remember the headlights catching the corner of the house as I pulled out. And then I heard it. The back door slamming shut. I slept in a motel that night. Called the sheriff from the lobby. Told them everything. To their credit, they took it seriously. Went out, did a full sweep, took statements, logged evidence. They found the cigarette butts, found the broken attic latch, but no prints. No signs of forced entry. Said maybe I surprised a drifter. I went back the next day, changed every lock, installed motion lights, and nailed shut the attic door. Stayed 3 more nights with a knife under my pillow. On the 4th, I left before the sun came up and never went back. I've been a rural postal carrier in Jasper, Alabama for almost 7 years now. Same route, Monday through Saturday. Dusty roads, beat up mailboxes, and every now and then, a rusted fridge chilling in the yard like someone might fix it one day. My route stretches about 60 miles when you count the gravel loops and double backs. You get used to it. The scenery, the dogs that bark until you're 2 turns away, the quiet. It's got its own rhythm. Nothing much changing. Feels safe. Or at least it used to feel. Rural work's the kind of thing that gets you running on autopilot real quick. You know every turn by heart, which houses get junk mail, which mailboxes are duct taped together. You know who just lost a dog and who bakes pies and puts them out to cool like it's still the 1950s. I even had nicknames in my head for some of the places. The porch sitter house, the mailbox with duct tape, and the one with the plastic flamingos that multiply when no one's looking. It was boring, yeah, but I liked that. Last summer, early August, is when I first started noticing something strange on one of the more remote stretches of my route. County Road 39, out past the Bailey farm. There's a trailer there that's been empty for years. The yard's all weeds and busted furniture. The windows are boarded up, no power, no water. The mailbox is rusted out and hanging by one screw. So I was surprised when I saw a man standing next to it. He was tall, thin, wearing an old army jacket and jeans too short for his legs. He wasn't holding anything, didn't wave, just stood there, eyes shaded by a cap, staring straight ahead. I gave a nod as I drove by, but he didn't react. The next day, same man, same spot. Still no mail to deliver. Still no movement. On the 3rd day, he was already standing there when I came around the bend. Same position, like he hadn't moved since the day before. His stillness made me uneasy. It wasn't just that he didn't move, it was how completely he didn't move. Like a statue. I made a note in my log, just in case something came of it. When I mentioned it to the guy who runs dispatch, He just shrugged and said the trailer's been unoccupied since 2016. Probably someone's squatting, he said. Keep an eye on it. The fourth day, he wasn't there. That night, I came home from work and found my mailbox open. The flag was up, but there was nothing inside. I don't send mail from home, never have. I figured maybe a kid was messing around, but it kept happening. The next day, same thing. Flag up, no mail. On the third morning, there was an envelope inside. Blank. No stamp, no return address, no markings at all. Just a plain white envelope, sealed. I opened it. Empty. I stood there for a minute, just holding it. I thought about the man, about the boarded up trailer, and then I tossed the envelope in the trash and went on with my day. But that night, something didn't feel right. I couldn't shake it. At 2:14 a.m., my front porch motion light came on. I checked the feed from my security cam. Nothing had triggered the recording, but the light stayed on for nearly 3 minutes. When I checked the porch, the mat had been moved, folded in half. There was no wind that night. Nothing else was out of place. I reviewed the rest of the week's camera footage. On Wednesday morning, the camera had captured one single frame, a blurry figure standing by my mailbox at 2:17 a.m., just one frame. Then gone. No footsteps, no second appearance, just that one freeze frame. I paused the video and studied it. It was grainy, but I could make out the jacket, the short jeans, the posture. It was him. I called the sheriff's office. They sent a deputy out. He walked the property, looked around, and told me the usual. No signs of trespassing, nothing stolen or damaged. Probably a drifter, he said. Just passing through. That didn't explain the envelope, or what happened the following night. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that grainy figure. At exactly 2 a.m., the porch light clicked on again. I stepped outside, bat in hand, but there was no one there. The stillness was overwhelming. It felt like even the air didn't want to move. The next morning, I found a second envelope. Same as before, blank. This time, when I opened it, there was a single piece of paper inside. Folded once, no writing on either side. Just folded. That was when I started checking the mailbox 3 times a day. I bought a lockbox and left it next to the house. Started carrying pepper spray on my route. The dogs barking weren't just background noise anymore. I drove slower, checking every field like I was expecting something. I stayed with a friend the next night. Told them I was having electrical issues at home. They didn't ask too many questions. I didn't offer much. When I came back 2 days later, everything looked normal. But the second I stepped into my bedroom, my stomach knotted. On my pillow was the first envelope, the one I had thrown away. I checked the doors, all locked, windows secure. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints, nothing. That night, I sat with the lights on, just listening. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft tap, not at the door, on the window. Just once. I left again, this time for a week. I kept getting that weird feeling, like I wasn't alone, that he had followed me. Eventually, I put in for a transfer. Told my supervisor I needed a change. They gave me a desk job at the main office, sorting mail, filing complaints, no more long roads, no more isolation, no more mailboxes with people who shouldn't be there. I moved out of that house a month later. But sometimes when I visit friends nearby and check their mail for them, I'll catch myself watching the road too long. And every now and then, I'll drive past that same trailer on County Road 39. It's still boarded up, still abandoned. But the mailbox isn't hanging by one screw anymore. It's been replaced, brand new, shiny, with a flag that's always up. Last week, someone at the front desk handed me an interoffice envelope. No name on it. Inside was a blank piece of paper, folded once, and no one knows who put it there. I never saw the man again. But I still check my camera every night, just in case. My parents sent me to stay with my grandfather the winter I turned 16. He just had hip surgery and couldn't move around like he used to. They figured I could help him out while school was on break, and truth be told, I was happy to go. It meant escaping the noise of my house for a few weeks, and I always liked the way his place felt, a little removed from everything. Simple. Still. He lived alone, 2 hours outside Bismarck, in a small cabin nestled between pine trees and snow-packed hills. The kind of place where time slows down. The kind of place where you don't hear cars or sirens, just wind in the branches and ice popping now and then. The drive out was long. The last gas station was 25 miles from his place, and once you turned off the main road, you were swallowed up by woods. No neighbors, no streetlights, just a gravel road that curled through the trees like a vein. Cell service disappeared somewhere between mile marker 17 and the turnoff to his driveway. The cabin had one bedroom, a small guest room, a narrow kitchen, and a living room that smelled like cedar and ash. It was quiet inside. Not eerily quiet, just hushed. Like the walls had absorbed years of silence. And in the middle of the living room was his recliner. A big, faded, dark brown chair with threadbare arms and a dent so deep it looked like it had swallowed him whole over time. That chair was off limits, always had been. Even as a little kid, I knew not to sit there. It was his spot, his anchor. Every memory I had of him, coffee, books, radio baseball games, was connected to that chair. He was slower after the surgery. He winced when he moved, but he still grumbled when I tried to help too much. I cooked easy meals, stacked firewood, swept. In the evenings, we watched old movies. He'd fall asleep mid-conversation with the TV still flickering. That first night, after helping him to bed, I sat in the guest room with a book. Around midnight, I heard a creak from the living room. Not a random wood pop, but a steady rhythm, back and forth, like someone rocking gently in a chair. I paused and listened, then got up, peeked down the hallway. Nothing. Darkness. The chair was still. The fire had died. I blamed the house. Old places always make noise. The next morning, I mentioned it. He barely looked up from his eggs. "This old place talks to itself," he said, "especially in winter." Night 2, I heard it again, this time a little louder, and something else. Breathing. A low, raspy exhale that made me sit up in bed. I almost opened the door, but I talked myself out of it. Night 3, I got up for water around 2 a.m. As I stepped into the hall, I stopped. There was someone in the chair. Not my grandfather. He was tall, thinner, dressed in a gray zip-up jacket, skin pale. He sat with his head tilted down like he was watching the fire that wasn't lit. His hands were resting on the arms of the recliner, not moving, not twitching, just there. I stared for maybe 5 seconds before quietly backing into my room and locking the door. The next morning, I asked Grandpa if anyone had come by. He shook his head. Nobody visits anymore. Why would they? That was it. No hint of a joke, no teasing. He just kept eating like I hadn't said anything strange. The fourth night, I didn't want to sleep. I lay in bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling. The creaking started again, then stopped, then started again. I tiptoed to the hallway and peered around the corner. Empty chair. But the smell hit me. Cigarette smoke. Not fresh. Faint, but unmistakable. My grandfather had quit 10 years earlier, after a health scare. He hated the smell now, but it clung to the air like something that had settled into the walls. I opened a window, said nothing the next morning. By then, I was carrying my phone around at night. I wanted to catch it, prove to myself that something was happening. Night 5, I woke to creaking again. I grabbed my phone, turned on the camera, and walked slowly down the hall. The recliner was moving, back and forth, no one in it. I filmed 20 seconds. No gust of wind, no shaking floorboards. The chair rocked like someone had just stood up and forgotten to stop it. I showed the video to my grandfather the next morning. He stared at the screen without blinking. Then he handed the phone back. He used to sit there, he said. Back when I was a kid. I frowned. Who? He didn't answer. That night, I heard him get up. I stayed in bed, listened as he shuffled into the living room. The rocking didn't start again, just silence. The next morning, the recliner had been turned to face the window. When I asked why, he just said he liked looking outside. That was my last night. I told him the roads were supposed to ice over and that my parents wanted me home early. He didn't argue, just gave me a quiet nod and said, "Thanks for coming." A year later, I came back for spring break. The recliner was gone. When I asked, Grandpa said it started rocking when no one was in it. Figured it was time to let it go. We never spoke about it again, but I still remember that man. Silent, pale, seated in my grandfather's chair. And the way he looked past me like he was waiting for someone else to leave. Maybe me. I'd only been out of rehab for 6 weeks when my aunt called and asked if I could help her fix up her property in Elko, Nevada. She lived alone on about 20 acres of desert scrub and weather-beaten hills, a place I remembered vaguely from childhood trips, before everything with my parents fell apart, before the drinking, before the couch surfing and apologies. She said she'd pay me under the table, give me a place to stay, and let me work at my own pace. I was broke, sober, and trying to stay that way. It sounded like the best offer I was going to get, so I went. The guest house was small but comfortable. A converted tool shed with a little kitchenette, a bathroom, and a loft bed that sat just under a sloped ceiling. The air was dry enough to crack your lips in the night. Wind came and went in bursts, rattling the window panes and filling the silence with a strange, hollow breath. It was quiet out there. Quiet in the way the desert always is. For someone trying to stay clean, it was kind of perfect. No temptation, no noise, no distractions. Except for the door and the floor. It was in the back corner under a sun-faded area rug I moved on my first day while sweeping. Thick wood, darkened with age. 4 rusted hinges and a heavy metal hasp secured with a padlock the size of a child's fist. It didn't look like a normal trapdoor. No ring to pull it open, no venting, nothing. Just a slab of wood sealed shut with authority. When I asked her about it that night, she didn't even blink. Old cellar, she said. Leave it alone. That was it. No further explanation. And I didn't push. I was a guest, technically. And when you're trying to fix your life, you don't start by poking around locked doors in someone else's house. But that door, it felt wrong. Not just mysterious, but out of place. Like it belonged to another building entirely. The kind of thing you'd find in a root cellar or bunker, not in a renovated guest house used mostly for storage and visiting family. At first, I left it alone. I kept my head down, fixed up broken fence posts, cleared brush from around the house, replaced cracked window seals. But at night, when I lay in bed listening to the wind scrape the stucco, I started to hear things coming from under the floor. Not just creaks or shifting boards. Heavier sounds. Shuffling, like someone moving slowly. Pauses, then what I can only describe as breath. Not quite human, but close. Long, dry exhalations as though someone or something was sleeping beneath me. I told myself it was wind in the pipes, or rodents. I even checked under the floorboards around the edges of the room. Nothing. No damage. No signs of animals. By the second week, I started leaving my phone on record overnight. I'd play the files back the next morning, kind of dreading what I might hear. Mostly silence. But on 3 different nights, I caught the same thing. A faint humming sound. Not quite a song. Just a low, constant hum like someone chanting to themselves in the dark. And worse, layered under the humming, something like scratching. Long and slow. That night, I checked the padlock again. It looked different, like someone had handled it. There were smudge marks across the surface. One of the screws holding the hasp was loose. I tightened it, locked the door again, and tried to convince myself it was nothing. A few nights later, I woke up out of nowhere, and that's when I saw it. Light. A thin strip of yellow-white light bleeding out from the cracks around the floor door. Not flickering, not moving. Still, constant. As if someone had switched on a bare bulb below the floor and left it. I didn't move for a long time. Just stood there staring at the light, trying to decide whether to say something, whether to wake her up. Eventually, I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. The next morning, I asked her point blank, "Do you ever go down there?" She looked up, slow. Her eyes were dry and tired. "That door stays shut. You understand?" "What's down there?" "Nothing that needs company." That was it. Her tone left no room for negotiation. 2 days later, I found the padlock hanging open. Still hooked into the hasp, but unlatched. Like someone had opened it and gotten distracted, or wanted me to know it had been opened. I locked it again, sat on the edge of my bed staring at it. Every time the wind blew hard against the windows, I jumped. I started sleeping with the light on, but eventually, I gave in. I had to see for myself. I always do. One night, around midnight, I waited until everything was quiet. I slid the lock out of the hasp, peeled back the trapdoor, and hit it with the flashlight. Wooden stairs. Narrow, uneven, steep. Dirt walls. The air that came out was thick, like opening an old crypt. It smelled like wet stone and something older, something sour. I stepped down, one stair, then another. The walls were closer than I expected. I turned slowly, letting the beam of the flashlight trace the space. And then something moved. Not a lot, just a flicker at the edge of the beam. A shifting shape in the far corner. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person. It was wrong. As if someone had taken the outline of a human being and erased the details, leaving a shadow that could breathe. I didn't wait to see what it did. I ran, barely touched the stairs as I flew up them, slammed the door and jammed the lock through the hasp so hard it bent. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat with the lights on, listening. In the morning, I told my aunt everything. The figure, the light, the movement. She didn't act surprised, just stirred her tea and nodded. That's why I asked you not to open it. I packed before noon. The last thing I saw before pulling out of the driveway was the guest house. The curtain inside the only window had been pulled back, and someone was standing behind it, just out of view, watching me leave. Well, you made it through the countryside, but now imagine it's 2 a.m. and the cameras just went dark. Smash that like, hit subscribe, and tell me, what's your I should have quit right then moment? Because the next video, it's darker, colder, and far too quiet for comfort. Click now to watch 4 very scary night shift horror stories. You'll never look at an empty parking lot the same way again. Stay alert out there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.